Hello, welcome to today's session of Get the Knack. My name is Sue Steele, and I'll be your host today. I'm a member of the National Academy of Construction. I joined in 2021, and I'm excited about our topic and our guests. We are going to be discussing how to transform the industry and build a better nation, which is the new tagline that NAC has adopted for 2026. I have two guests, wonderful guests from MOCA Systems. The first is Sandy Hamby. She's CEO of the company, and she's also a member of the NAC. And I will get her to introduce herself in a minute. And Brandon Michalski, and he is the chief economist of MOCA Systems. And I've really enjoyed getting to know both of them as members of NAC and as part of their company. It's a lot of exciting topics we're going to talk about. Let me start out. Sandy, would you give us a brief introduction, self-introduction?
Sure. I am Sandy Hamby, the president and CEO of MOCA Systems, Inc. I am an architect who has spent my entire career in the construction field. Transforming the industry to build a better nation is at the very core of what I believe in and what MOCA Systems, Inc. is all about. Thank you.
That's great. All right, Brandon.
Yeah, my name is Brandon Michalski. I am the chief economist here at MOCA Systems, Inc. I have a background in engineering, mining engineering, heavy construction, and I joined MOCA about 2 years ago, and I'm excited to talk about the topics we have on hand today.
Well, this is great. You know, we just wrapped up an annual meeting of the National Academy. It was held in Colorado Springs in October, end of October. And we had as one of our topics the trends and the issues in the surge in data center construction and what impact it's going to have on our company, our country, our companies, our industry. And so I just wanted to set this particular episode up because we're actually going to have two episodes on this topic. The first one, just in terms of Brandon and Sandy giving us some background about what are the impacts and what can we do as an industry. And the second one's going to dig into a little more specifics about, tools and approaches that we can use when we go through construction of a data center. And so I'm really excited. We have a two-part topic, two-part series, and we're just going to kick it off with a few questions. First of all, I'd love for Sandy just to talk a little bit about this tagline that we've adopted at the NAC, transforming the industry to build a better nation. Sandy, maybe you could give us some background and context on that.
Absolutely. Well, just to define the word transformation, what exactly does that mean? And really, our industry in the past has oftentimes resulted in parties being in their corners and documenting the best way forward in terms of change orders and non-collaborative approaches. And so transformation, it means innovation through collaboration. It means working together, data-informed planning, integrating technology with people, and ensuring every party that's involved in the entire process is successful. We have a philosophy in MOCA Systems, Inc. of combining economic insight, for example. We'll hear more later on the economics that are associated with delivering a built future for America. There's technology, a lot of platforms. AI is entering into the industry right now. And in many cases, we don't know how that will play out. There's professional services that strengthen decision-making and make it easy across the entire project lifecycle. All these things are working together to build a better nation. We need to emphasize true transformation, which requires awareness of market direction. For example, a large focus of NAC last year was on safety. Safety is extremely important. We have a very high incident rate and it's not improving. That's only going to increase in the data center market. So we need to be innovative and work together to offset that trend. The transition to the data center focus, where are we going to get the power? What's the best for the communities? What's the best for the environment? When you tag the build a better nation onto transforming the industry, which is the full tagline, it means not just resolving the construction problems, but resolving the problems as it relates to the entire community. That's important to NAC, it's important to MOCA Systems Inc., and it's something that we really need to pay attention to as the boom in the data center market evolves over the next 10 to 15 years.
That's very helpful. I appreciate that. I think that this series is going to really put a spotlight on this surge in data center development and execution, implementation. And I think if Brandon could share with us a little bit, I'd love to hear you unpack the surge. What impact are all these factors going to have? AI, energy utilization, investment challenges. Maybe you can talk us through that. I know you've done some work on that and have a special perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. So there are a couple policy factors that are really fueling that rapid data center expansion. Obviously, behind all of this construction is the capital surge. Wherever there's capital, there's going to be building in this industry. So behind all of that remains the capital. So as long as that continues to flow, we can expect to see data centers constructed throughout the United States. Specifically, policy factors, or perhaps lack thereof. The United States has pursued more of a deregulation policy in this administration for artificial intelligence. So data centers are kind of the natural physical progression of that build out. So we've seen that being more friendly to development of data centers in the United States. What we're really seeing, though, is that capital is now hitting more of a wall with physical constraints, realistic constraints. The impact on energy use, the spatial constraints of real estate, and ultimately the capital behind that has a certain amount of force, but those realistic constraints do play a factor. So although we're seeing an enormous explosion of data center construction, it's being somewhat regulated by those constraints. I think there's also an opportunity for adaptive reuse. Although those cases are becoming increasingly limited, as we see kind of more of the locations of those would be kind of closer to the central nodes where they're able to process much more quickly. And then another factor here that kind of limits is our shortage in skilled labor. And I know there's been an enormous conversation around attracting skilled labor to construction. And in the case of data centers, specifically electricians, HVAC, and the like. So there's a lot of pressure there, which can lead to schedule expansion that really needs to be mitigated.
Well, you've raised a lot of important things that we as an industry need to address. Since you brought up the skill shortages, let me just kind of dig into that a little bit and ask you or Sandy to comment. Because of these demands on the workforce and the fact that we need to be upskilling and doing more training and development, what can we do to really prepare for that? And as an organization, NAC, do you have any specific recommendations for the NAC to be a leader in those areas?
Sure. So there's an enormous amount of pressure on the labor market, as I had mentioned. Some interesting demographic shifts are occurring right now where the baby boomer generation now constitutes 15% of the overall construction market. Obviously, that has shifted from a much higher level, but the replacement, which is really kind of that Gen Z moving into the workforce, hasn't replaced that retirements. So what's important to note here is trade programs and really attracting a younger generation to the skilled trades. And what's even more perhaps important for data centers is attracting those folks from a regional perspective. Looking at these markets where the demand for electricians might be higher, for example, the Northern Virginia area where already labor is at a premium. Getting kids involved in trade, even in high school, perhaps at an even earlier age, can really help draw them into a career that ultimately has great benefits. We it's not the electricians of the past, right? We're not just routing wires. It's more complex, it's more sophisticated, and as a result, it requires a more skilled workforce, which is perfect mantle for a new generation to take up.
Sandy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely, Brandon. You brought up quite a few good points, and there's culture, and then there's workforce readiness. I strongly believe that construction is a pathway for young people that is not just labor. It's a profession. It takes intelligence. It is extremely complex. And we must develop our future leaders to know when they're in high school, even maybe even in middle school or elementary school, that construction is a pathway that is equal to doctors and lawyers, et cetera. It's a very honorable profession. And somehow along the way, I think it got to be known as something that is secondary to the other professions. And it actually takes an extreme amount of skill. It takes talent. I believe in this wholeheartedly. It's one of the missions of MSI is to be able to facilitate more people coming into the construction industry and ensuring parents and kids that this is a really good transition, as Brandon brought up. We are really short of people in the industry at all levels. Also having the skills to do actually something with your hands, and it's just not a college track, it's the trade track. I think that's the most promising pathway for our youth these days. Not only do you learn a skill that can be used throughout your entire lifetime, but it's something that is so essential to our community, which is important to kNACk. I also like the focus of empowering the field. Now we're talking specifically related to construction. And I heard the president, CEO of Compass Data Centers describing a data center construction environment that we're spending so much money that it's 80% Toyota and 20% innovation. That innovation that's so key to this. Everything else is process oriented. It's not complex. It is oftentimes repeating in the data center market, but there's that 20% that is really focused in on the simplified planning and scheduling platforms, or making decisions very early in the process that helps trades work together and adapt quickly. Things happen on site, and usually within the data center greenfield market, that's right away on the site, at the site level, when they're moving dirt. For renovations and colos, that could be at any moment when you're looking at a facility or adapting some other environment into a data center, and you have to be able to think quickly, collaborate, work together. The trades, it's not a vertical structure as it used to be. It's empowering the field. Then, of course, there's always the human side of transformation. Technology is not easy to roll out, but it does make things more efficient, makes people communicate more effectively. And if anything is tied to kNACk in building a better nation, it starts with training, it starts with education, equipping, and supporting the workforce that delivers to each one of these projects. It's amazing the long hours they work, and oftentimes the amount of complaints they get for impacting others, whether it be traffic or rerouting or shutting things down. But that workforce needs to be supported at a great level to improve the safety, improve their place in society as a profession that matters.
That sounds great. Let me just comment, as you were talking, Sandy, I was thinking about how kNACk is making a difference in workforce development. For example, we have a next gen committee that's really focused on being sure that our messaging and our I guess products like our executive insights and these podcasts are relevant to rising leaders. We also have an active representation from Impact, which is the ironworkers union. And we do a lot of podcasts, of course, on safety. We've also done some podcasts on career development and these technical schools that are cropping up instead of having to go to college. So I just wanted to make those comments to add.
Yeah, I agree with those wholeheartedly. It's one of our biggest challenges, don't you think, Sue and Brandon? The workforce challenge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would just add on to these overarching comments. It's a path to wealth that hasn't really existed for a younger generation for some time. Working in a field where you can actually see the tangible results in the field, but also back at home, where you can have a livable wage, which in a lot of sectors is really starting to decline. So it certainly is a path to wealth, and it's a very attractive future for some folks.
Well, that's great. So I'd like to continue our conversation, talk a little bit more about impacts not only on workforce and upskilling, but on communities. As these data centers were cited, I think, Brandon, you talked about some of the different locations as it related to labor supply. And what about these communities? What are some of the impacts that are occurring in these communities where data centers are increasing?
Yeah, Sue, that's a great question. I think the verdict is really still out on that. On one hand, there's regional development that increases, construction labor pools and sources local resources, concrete, equipment. But on the other hand, I think there's maybe a negative where perhaps increased power draw is going to lead to some increases in power bills. There might be some additional water processing costs. I look at states like Texas, where there's a decent increase in data center construction. Initially, the power offset was handled almost exclusively by the grid. And now they've actually instituted regulation where new data centers are required to provide their own baseload power. So I think what we're seeing here is this is so new and moving so quickly that there really isn't one real answer to what the overall impact is for this area. I think it's going to take maybe 5-10 years to really flesh out what the advantages are. When we look historically at infrastructure of which this is, we look at railroads. Those are permanent physical structures that moved goods between regions. And in a way, data centers are doing that as well. They're processing and pushing out information. But there's not a clearly defined benefit to that locale. So I think to kind of look at that holistically over the next 5 to 10 years is going to shed a little bit more insight on that. Another item there is the land and development. So with these data centers, it's going to bring in a lot of really good jobs. Actually, maybe not a lot, but a small tranche of really good jobs, really high tech jobs that are going to sustain a smaller workforce. They're perfect for the communities in which they serve, in that a lot of these communities are maybe on the fringes of larger metropolitan areas where the opportunities might not be as great as within these larger metropolitan areas. So it distributes a little more wealth outside. Another is the local incentives. So the incentives that we're seeing are kind of driven by who can have the most attractive offer. And I think some of that is starting to decline, and it's more what makes the most long-term economic sense. So we're seeing obviously the balance between what's right for these local communities, what's right for the regions, and then what the local incentives are driving these businesses in. They can stimulate workforce development. Obviously, there needs to be continuous improvement to HVAC systems, continuous monitoring to electrical, and those jobs will continue to be there separately from the individual data center projects. So it does lead to some secondary economic growth or projected secondary economic growth. But really, I think the clear, crisper answer to that is going to be had in about 5 years.
That's very
Brandon, I'd like to add to that, transformation, the word transformation, we started with that, brings both opportunity and responsibility, right? And just like you brought up the trains, or maybe Henry Ford with cars, replacing the horse back in the day, innovation, the opportunity here is innovation. There's a sustainability factor to all this. How are we going to get that power? New ideas are coming forward. There is no telling what kind of innovation is going to occur in the energy creation market. Probably things we're not even thinking about yet. And yet there's responsibility. It's responsibility to be sustainable through all this and not to overindulge our communities with the desire to build more and more data centers. I think the combination of both that opportunity and responsibility is very important. It's something that NAC is focused on, and it's something that will drive both economic activity while maintaining what's best for the nation.
Absolutely. Do you all have any comments on just the regulatory environment or the collaboration with public agencies or cities, state, federal impacts? It kind of reminds me of when we started the PPP, private and public partnerships about 2 decades ago, that it all felt new, but then eventually there ended up being some leaders that really made a mark as to they knew how to do that. They knew how to get the collaboration to work. Do either of y'all have comments on that?
I'll go to Sandy first here.
Okay, thank you. That's really interesting. I think the regulatory requirements will be driven by need and necessity. What's holding up the data center development right now is the utility companies, which are often organizations that are run by state or municipal entities, and they are not able to give a final commitment to owners or developers on whether they can deliver the amount of power required. That is causing significant delays. It's causing uncertainty. It's causing behavior. And there are no consistent regulations at this point that help the owner, the developer, or the entity that wants to use AI to build a better business. It's kind of like the wild, wild west at the moment. I think what you're seeing is, excuse me, as some agencies are running into this problem and realizing they cannot let everything go without some sort of regulation that you're starting to see some of them form, Sue. Brandon, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. That really hammers home the kind of where we started in our conversation, which was the reason why these data centers and artificial intelligence is developing in the United States was a real clear deregulatory type stance. Now we're finding that obviously there needs to be a middle ground, right? Sandy mentioned electricity constraints that are kind of in between. Are they the regulatory administration? Are they is the onus on the data center to provide power? What's the interface between the two look like? And I think really we're still working that out. Each state, region, municipality has their own rule book. If I had the rule book for establishing a data center in every location, it would be the most valuable tool I think that existed. But it's finding a balance between the regulatory commissions, the data centers, and ultimately back to the capital demand. Is there a return on investment that meshes with the municipalities and the utilities that ultimately gets these projects built?
Well, I want to drill just for a minute into MOCA and the ways that your teams are trying to address these challenges. Are you, I'm just thinking, brainstorming here, are you a collection point for best practices, lessons learned? How are some ways that you're helping your clients tackle some of these challenges? Maybe, just give us a few examples if you can. I know you might have to say it's a confidential client, but I just maybe some examples would be useful.
Sure. We're on over 300 data centers through the use of our software platform called TouchPlan. They came to us, meaning the installers, the general contractors, and primarily the subcontractors came to us. So we did some digging. Why? Why did they find that useful? It is so critical. Time is so critical that a collaborative way in which to work where all subcontractors know what each other is doing. They know the problems that come on site. They can see it all. It is no longer command and control structure where a individual might control all the different decisions that are going on. They all work together. You can even use TouchPlan, for example, as a planning tool while you're sitting in your truck. Oh, I always call it, you found the dinosaur on site. What do we do now? And then the whole team works together to be able to resolve that. The tenet in MOCA Systems, Inc. is we believe that a lot of decisions that are made at the very beginning of a project cause the team to be in recovery mode from day one. That's no reflection of the owner. It's no reflection of the team or the architect or the design individuals. What it is a reflection of is there's so many unknowns when you start with that as you go through the process, that the thing that everybody cares about most might get sacrificed in order to keep the project moving forward. So we believe in an early engagement. TouchPlan was designed to allow collaboration for that early engagement with quick decision making and a framework by which decisions could be made without sacrificing the top, or what we call the imperatives of the project, the top priorities of the entire team. And it's not just the owner's imperatives. We call it stakeholder imperatives. It's the entire team. And, nobody's willing to come forward and sacrifice those. So decision making becomes quick and easy, and it helps that recovery mode that is almost automatic in the construction industry. You find something wrong day one, right? You have this great plan, and boom, day one, it's already blown out in the water. So almost all of our energy, all of our efforts, everything we develop in-house has to do with resolving, facilitating all stakeholders to succeed and collaboration in the construction environment. It's a little bit of a transformation, if you will. Brandon?
I'm glad, Sandy, I'm glad you explained that because some people may not be familiar with TouchPlan or MOCA. So I think it's good that we go ahead and just put that out there. And like you said, the imperatives to me sound a lot like best practices that you've collated, if you will, through so many different customers. Brandon, do you want to add anything? Any examples?
Yeah, sure. So I think ultimately Sandy tackled the kind of the crux of the question there, which is, how can we efficiently build these data centers? And in terms of picking up a hammer and really doing it, I think that platform has organically evolved to kind of adapt to that type of construction. But if we step back before construction, and we're kind of signaling, where are these most appropriate? I think some of the services we provide from, continuous alignment, economic services, location services. We just provided some initial regional perspectives in Texas on a number of markets there for folks that really want to understand what those markets are. What are the labor constraints in these, 3 or 4 markets? What is optimal for our spending? What's the biggest long-term cost to our project? So I would say, even starting before the project, we're offering the ability to hammer out the long-term success of a project and ultimately the largest ROI.
And could you tell our listeners the name, maybe Brandon, if you could give the MOCA website, and also I think you have a report, Sizing the Surge, U.S. Data Center Construction Outlook to 2030. That sounds phenomenal. So how can people get a copy of that?
Sure. We have that on our mocasystems.com. Up in the top right is reports, and you'll see all of our reports, as well as our quarterly Today's Construction Economy, our Sizing the Surge to 2030, where we could take a capital-based approach. I've hammered down pretty hard money behind projects, and we really take a look at how much of that capital is forming behind these data centers.
That's great. And we're going to have to close this out. I thought I'd just ask for any final thoughts or comments to wrap up. Maybe Sandy, starting with you.
Well, I couldn't be more happier with NAC's approach on transforming construction or the industry to build a better nation. I think it's a super opportunity for NAC. It's something I strongly believe in, and it's something I built a company around, is how do we make this better? Can we please just leave the industry a little bit better off than when we started? And so I think that's important. I was very pleased with that adoption in October of 2025.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Sue. Thank you so much for having us here. This has been a wonderful and engaging conversation. I really appreciate the three of us kind of sharing our perspectives and the development within this industry. And I look forward to more growth and more higher expectations for the industry and just continuing to transform.
Well, it sounds fantastic. I have several takeaways, just mostly around the area of how much innovation and creativity it's going to take to really solve these intractable problems. Also, the workforce shortages, the role that NAC and other industry organizations can play to really upskill and prepare the next generation for these challenges. Also, just the nature of the impacts. Earlier in my career, I did work for an electric utility, so I get a little bit about demand planning and the challenges, Sandy, that you outlined and Brandon outlined in dealing with energy sources. So I think NAC has a brilliant opportunity to make a difference and to make an impact here. And as we go forward, we'll keep our listeners updated on this Get the kNACk podcast of what's coming up and try to stay current. I would like to give a little preview to the next episode that we have coming up. Sandy, I know you're going to be a part of that. The title is going to be Building Smarter, kNACk and the Future of Data Center Construction. Can you give a little tagline for that so that at least people might tune into the next episode?
Sure. As I mentioned before, we're on 300 data centers, and we're going to have Brett Adamczyk appear on that podcast and talk about some of the things we've learned as we've gathered duration data, et cetera, on over 300 data centers. What's working? What's most efficient? How can people build better? How can we improve the workforce? And the complexity, as I said at the beginning, 80% Toyota, 20% innovation. So keeping the process simple, keeping the process effective, keeping the process to where you can use data to really drive decisions. That's what we're going to talk about next.
Well, that's exciting. And we'll look forward to seeing you again with your other colleague. And I'd just like to close by thanking everybody for joining Get the kNACk for this episode. Thank you, Brandon and Sandy. I'm excited that we're kicking off a very relevant and current topic, the surge in data center construction, how NAC and other leaders in our industry can make a difference. For our listeners, please provide feedback on this episode of Get the kNACk. Our website is naocon.org/insights. And you can also email us at getthenack@naocon.org. And we'd love to hear from you which topics you have of interest. We have a full calendar for 2026 we're trying to fill up right now. I know I'll date this podcast, but We have probably 20 to 25 episodes that we're going to do in 2026. So we welcome your feedback and your ideas and any specific comments on today's episode. And we'll be back with more content soon. Have a safe day.